Hello, everybody. It is Steve, your friendly neighborhood lawn gnome, and welcome back to That's Comical. I am very excited for today's show because it is great to get at least 75% of the That's Comical team in the room. So I just want to say hello to my colleagues, April, Cami, and Shay. Hello, everybody. So glad to be able to do this show with you.
Happy to be here.
Absolutely. And of course, if you happen to be watching the show today and it happens to be a Wednesday, then say it with me now. Happy New Comic Book Day. Yeah, eventually everybody's going to turn that into muscle memory. I can feel it. But we really hope that you enjoy the show today because it is a new year and we definitely got off to a very good start last year. But I am just so excited for these ladies as well as our other colleague, Andy, to really take this show in 2022 and move it into the next level. There's so many great things in the work and we really hope that you're all ready for them. But of course, there's a famous saying that is, we don't know where we're going until we know where we've been. So we are here to recap 2021 and give our three favorite anything that we chose for 2021. And we hope to know what you guys thought were some of your favorites in 2021. So please feel free to leave a comment and a like. And of course, if you enjoy this and you want to see what's happening later on this year, don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you're up to date with all of our latest content. So ladies, I hope that you all had a fantastic 2021 of reading, whether it was comics or manga and everything in between.
I definitely did.
I think so.
Yeah, it was definitely a surprising year for me in particular because I sort of went into 2021 with an agenda because I was listening to all the news and there seemed to be things, particularly from the big name comic book companies, Marvel and DC, wasn't really so impressed with where they were heading. And yet it turned out that I found some real gems and I ended up reading a decent amount of comics from the big two. But I will definitely say that when it comes to my absolute favorites, it was really hard to find a Marvel or DC title, whether it was a mini series or an ongoing series in my top 10. The indies, I would probably think this may be the independent comics' strongest year to date. There were so many amazing artists and writers just getting their ideas out there with a lot more liberty, and they really raised the bar as far as I'm concerned. We'll go counterclockwise. Shay, you tackled a lot of manga as well as a couple of comic books. What were some of your favorite highlights outside of titles that you saw in regards to your reading this year?
In the year of 2021, I feel like it was a year where I actually, because I've been reading comics and manga a lot longer, I've been able to hone what I like and what I don't. And so it's a matter of I'm picking up less of the things because everybody else is reading them, and I'm only picking up what I actually think I'm going to enjoy. And there's so much more available, especially in manga. There's a lot more like romance and slice of life titles, which is what I tend to lean towards in my novels as well as my comics and manga. And we're getting more and more of them because more and more people are buying them. And I do think being a creator that has a platform where I'm constantly talking about it is helping publishers realize, oh, they actually want these things. So they're starting to publish more of them and it's been fantastic. Some of my favorites finished this year though. So
yeah, it's always sad when a story that you have been enjoying so much is, you know, especially when it comes to comics, when you get to that last issue, or in manga, when you get to that last volume, it's like, do I really want this to end? Even though
I've actually put off a few of the endings because I'm not ready to read them. Even though like the arc of their story clearly is ending and you can tell, and it's time to say goodbye, but you still don't want to say goodbye.
Yeah, and you know, it's funny that you mentioned that because I remember April making a video very similarly talking about how she wanted to take her own channel moving forward. And that seems to be the common thing that I'm seeing right now, particularly in the booktube community. People are suddenly starting to realize, wait a minute, I didn't make this channel for people and to just read things that everybody else is reading. I did this for myself. So why am I not having fun with this anymore? Maybe I need to start focusing more on me and less on what people perceive of me. April, let's elaborate a little bit more on that, especially with how you felt about your reading this past year.
Yeah, I feel like there's a shift just because of how long a lot of us have been doing these kind of videos and how old like the booktube community is, that we went from very young to very sponsored and consumer driven, then back to kind of we're finding our roots again. And that's kind of where my reading went just this past year. I think I found that wall. I haven't always read a lot of comics. I grew up reading manga. And so this past year, just getting into comics a lot more, I think made me stop and realize what I had been doing in my actual reading life of picking up popular and hyped and not really going towards all of those things that I loved about reading in the first place. And comics helped me find that again, because it's brand new. I'm just diving into a lot of titles I've never heard of. So I have to start to like curate things in my brain. And it made me stop and think, why am I picking things up? And who am I picking these up for? So I really love the fact that, first of all, that we picked up this channel in the first place, and I got to start thinking about a different style of reading, which made me think about my book style of reading. And I found a lot of things I really like in this world that remind me of the whole reason I started reading in the first place. So that's where I'm at and what 2021 brought me.
Well, also, you know, that I, as someone who had been following you and Shay for many years, and Cami as well, you know that the reason why I asked you guys to join me on this little adventure is because I just love the way you go into your reading and the way you analyze your reading. And I always knew that you guys had appreciations for these areas of reading media. So I just knew that you guys were going to bring some great insight and some great perspective. That's why you guys are here. But Cami, I left you for last just because of the fact that I had said this numerous times whenever we did videos together here. You went into this completely blind and knowing a couple of things. Like, you knew some superheroes, you did, but you dove into the deep section of the pool head first, and just your enthusiasm for this medium, you know, it just makes me so happy that I decided to collect comics again in 2019, because you and me, whether it's discussions, just the two of us, or the discussion that you had with April, or when you and me and Andy get into a room and the wackiness ensues, it has just been so much fun as someone who has been watching you grow. Cami, am I wrong about that? Please let me know.
Not even one little bit. And it's funny, I love how this kind of segued this conversation where it started with Shay and how she's talking about, you know, her changes in terms of being intentional in her reading. And then, you know, April shares with us that portion of, you know, just kind of reinvigorating who she is and the roots of her channel, because I really feel, based on what you just told me, Steve, and all of that is really where I am with Cami as a person and Cami's Corner, because I have had the most fun in reading in the last 2 years that I have had probably in all of my adult life, because I'm being true to the reader that I have become. I remember looking back, you know, kind of just where this journey started, but I really took it back even further to grade school. And I used to have this small group of guys that I hung out with that were both animators and comic book enthusiasts and readers. And we played video games together. And that's really kind of where I evolved. I played with Ninja Turtle action figures. You know, I was very immersed in the world of Nintendo and PlayStation and X-Men and, you know, all of these things that over time I've kind of just put away. And obviously, I mean, you guys know the world that I've created for myself here. I am not by any means a minimalist, and I love my toys and I love being a collector, and I talk about that all the time. But when you stop and you analyze your roots, it kind of is enjoyable to get to this point and now have these conversations and be reading the types of material that I'm reading, because you're absolutely right, Steve. I jumped into it head first because that's what I should have probably done 2 decades ago. I should have been the type of comic book reader then that I am now, because I would have been a more of a nerd for sure, but I would have had such an arsenal of knowledge. And I think for me, that's been the challenge, is catching up on all the things that I missed, catching up on all the times that I said, I probably shouldn't be reading this because I'm too old, or I need to be this person, or society expects for me to be doing this right now, you know. And I say that because as a female and having become a wife and, you know, a stepmom and all of these things, you're kind of expected to just fit into these boxes. And I'm like, hold on just a second. What makes me cool and what makes me me is all of these little things. And so, you know, finding all of these hidden treasures that I feel like I've missed out on has been so much fun. And it's really taken me on such a wild journey, starting from the golden age of comics into what is now this so just magical, colorful indie world that we've stepped into. So I have had the best time. I am so looking forward to this year, so much so because of what these last 2 years have really done, you know. And I mean, taking this journey with you guys, it has been awesome to this point, but I really think that was just the surface. I think we've only scratched it, because I really feel like now you're going to start to see who we are as people, as readers, as collectors, because we're excited now, you know.
Yeah, and I think what's also very interesting is, you know, when I decided that I wanted to get back into collecting comics back in 2019, you know, after not reading comics since like 1997, I didn't even realize that there was an emerging comic book reading community in YouTube. And it's so different from the BookTube community, because yes, they're still offering you recommendations. They're still showing you what they read. But there's something a little different about it to me. It's just like they basically want you to see what they're reading, but at the end they always say, you know something, at the end you don't necessarily have to read this. We're just telling you what's out there so you can find what you're looking for. But I also really love how, because we're now in a world where the most popular thing in the world is an MCU movie, now all of these people are really saying, well, you know, you really should get an understanding of where these characters truly came from. And you should see how these characters have been around for almost 90 years now. And there's so many incredible stories like, hey, you like Spider-Man No Way Home? Well, did you take a look at the end credits and see special thanks to so-and-so? And you see all of these names and they're comic book writers. And when I watched that movie and I saw those names, I was like, I know each and every one of them because I've been reading their recent stories. So I just feel that where we are right now in regards to comic book reading, and also because of the fact that manga is practically taking over right now in regards to the Western world. I mean, the Funko Pop shelves in Barnes & Noble are now manga shelves in a big and amazing way. And it is just so nice to see crowds of people in a Barnes & Noble just looking at all these titles. But at the same time, even though it's a smaller bunch of shelves, there are still people crowding those graphic novel and comic book shelves as well. And that's why I feel that if you've never picked up a comic book or a manga at this point in time, I think now is the time to do it, just because these worlds are the it thing right now. And as a kid who was reading them, who got made fun of, I'm just laughing I'm laughing all the way to the bank, even though I'm not making a cent on any of this stuff. But I'm just saying that as a figure of speech. But
On that same note, a lot of that, especially the growth of manga, changed and happened during the Great Panini, as we'll call it. And it's one of those things where people were looking for something different because they felt like they kept reading the same things, because in books and a lot of things, we were all falling into a lot of the same tropes, and people were bored with it. And so they wanted to seek out something different. And so that's what led to manga growing so much, because people were deep diving Netflix first and discovering all the anime. And they're like, wait, there's books of this? I want to try. And that's kind of how I found it just years before. And so it's really interesting to see how that's continued to happen the longer we've been in this situation.
right. So what we're going to do is we're going to basically give our top 3 reads of the year. We're going to go individually. All of us will do number 3, number 2, number 1. And if you have read it, feel free to jump in on the conversation that the person is having. And if you haven't read it, the most important thing is we will learn something new. So Shay, we'd like to start with you. What was your number 3 of your top 3 reads of 2021?
Well, my number 3 is actually a comic, which surprised me this year, and that is Underworld. So Underworld is a take on Hades and Persephone, and this particular one just had very whimsical and powerful art to me, and it just made it so fantastic. I really enjoyed this particular take because you see that Hades is smitten with Persephone long before Persephone's really aware of Hades and who he is, and how they end up in the underworld is kind of a unique take as well. I mean, only the first volume's out right now, so I can't wait to get more trades of it. I'm super excited, but I loved this. I believe it did start as a webcomic though, so I might go try to hunt that down and read more of it because I'm kind of dying and I want more. I've reread this 4 times since I read
That's
it
awesome.
initially. So
that is fantastic.
That should tell you how much I love this. Granted, I love the myth of Hades and Persephone, and it's really interesting that that's kind of had a resurgence in the last 4 or 5 years in the reading world. And I think it's just that death in the maiden trope. Everybody's all about it. And I think a lot of that comes from the era in which we grew up in, where we had all these dark, broody heroes and these soft women. And so that's all just kind of coming back around now that we've all grown up. Those are the stories we're writing. And so it's just really interesting to see in a comic form. I mean, there's been so many Hades and Persephone comics. I do have a video planned for that. So
Good.
Sneak peek, check it later.
We'll be waiting. April, how about yourself?
Okay, so my number 3 pick, I just last year started to get into the horror manga. Shay has been pushing them towards me for the longest time.
Because you love horror, girl. I don't know how you haven't.
Well, so I picked up a lot of the short story collections. I'm going to butcher his name, Junji Ito. I think that's how you pronounce it.
Junji Ito.
Yeah, there you go. But this is by far the short story collection, Shiver, that stuck with me the most because it has some of the most disturbing short stories in it that at points I had to put it down. And I am not used to that because it's not, how do I describe this? It's stories that make your skin crawl in ways.
He is the king of horror manga for a reason.
Yeah, and his artistic style just lends itself to be horror-esque, and there are a lot of people who at this point emulate that because it's so dark that it's iconic in its own way, and it's not pretty, which this book still haunts me to this day. There's a short story
I get triggered looking at his covers, so yeah. I spine them all at work.
There's a short story in here I made my husband specifically read because I'm like, I cannot go through the trauma of what this story did to me by myself. So this is my number 3.
You're being traumatized. You're welcome.
I gotta say this, because when it comes to horror, and I'd like to see Cammie's reaction to this, because this is the scream queen of our channel right here. For me, you can give me all the jump scares in the world and they'll do nothing to me, but if you give me that really creepy story, I will have nightmares for months. Because I always say to people, I watched all the great horror films, all the great classic slashers, but when I saw Francis Ford Coppola's Bram Stoker's Dracula, I had nightmares. I couldn't sleep because that movie was so freaking creepy. The what I like to refer to as the mind fuck. The mind fuck gets me every single time. I cannot continue to live a normal life with those thoughts in my mind. And that movie still scares me to this very day. But that's also because that Gary Oldman is a gift from the gods, and he just knows how to scare you.
I will definitely second that. I say that to people continuously as I'm trying to introduce them to different genres of horror, subgenres of horror, I should say. And, in terms of what you're able to do, because people get exposed to horror at different levels and different ages in their life. And, when you are able to really just get into someone's mind and they remember it, whether they liked it or not, whether they're traumatized by it or not, if they remember it after they've walked away from it, or in this case, like years later, you've done a really good job. I will speak to that manga series though, April. I was highly unimpressed with the Funko Pop line that they created, because I don't feel that it did justice to his artwork. His artwork is creepy as hell, and I just feel like they kind of half-assed the Funkos. They could have done so much better. There was just so many layers and levels to those drawings, and to really make it creepy, they could have done it, because I've seen the work that Funko can do. And so I actually didn't purchase any of them for that very reason, because you just can't compare oranges to apples. That artwork is just chef's kiss, and those Funkos were just crap.
Totally agree.
Yeah. So, Cammie, what was your third favorite? I mean, I will be surprised, but I think I may know your number one, but I'm not going to say a word. I'd like to see what happens as this unfolds. So what is your number three?
Well, before I even begin, Steve, I'm going to preface by saying I think I'm going to blow you out of the water. I don't think you're going to get any of my choices, because I think you're going to make the assumption of where I went, and I took a left turn.
Hey,
So,
well, now you got me intrigued.
Number three for me is going to be Injustice Year Zero. This is brilliant. Absolutely phenomenal. I enjoyed this so much. I gobbled it up in one sitting. There is something very magical in a DC story that can kind of just pull you in its storyline, that kind of makes it relatable to your reality or your society. And there's a portion of this kind of very early on where you see Batman and Superman having a conversation at the Justice League Watchtower, and Batman is kind of trying to get inside Superman's head and let him know just kind of the person that he is and the legacy that he feels that Superman holds. And Batman looks at kind of the world from that perspective, and he said, it's so much smaller from here. It's kind of dangerous. I wouldn't want anybody to see it this way. And Superman's like, no, this is exactly how you would want people to see the world, where there's no differences, no prejudice, no differentiation, no color, just this is just people and the world as it is. And I'm just like, damn, that's a great way to segue into a story. But this really sets you up for what I think Injustice is going to be. I will say that I have not read year one yet, so this for me, starting off and feeling this powerful about this, and the reason I did start here, although this is a prequel to year one and you can begin the series without having read this, is because this was slated in the media as kind of a way to explain some things that happen. And one of the explanations that are given in this is something that happens with the Joker. And I really needed to feel that, because as my journey with comics has kind of gotten deeper and more vast, the Joker has become such a complex character for me. And what I thought I knew in terms of who he is so much more, and he is truly evil. I mean, I did not even scrape the surface with what I thought he was capable of. And he is honestly one of the most heinous villains that has ever been written. There is just no chill with him. There's no cutoff. He truly wants to wreak as much havoc and as much violence as he can possibly ensue. And he doesn't care who he hurts in the process, even people that he claims to love. And that is one sadistic individual. So this, I think, will set me up beautifully for the series, but the artwork is gorgeous, the storyline is magical, and this definitely is a must read, especially if you're a fan of the series already and you've read it. I really think that anyone who can get their hands on Year Zero will not be disappointed.
May I ask one question? Did Tom Taylor write this one, or was it a different author?
Tom Taylor did write it.
Okay, just wanted to know, because he's a name that a lot of people are talking about right now, for better or for worse. He's got some controversial stuff. He's got some not so controversial stuff. So for me, number 3 was a very good read. This is going to be based around an author that you're going to be hearing a lot from me on this channel. We're going to definitely talk about this comic in 2022, and we're definitely going to be talking about this author in 2022. My number 3 was Dark Horse Comics' Maze Book by Jeff Lemire, who wrote and drew this. This was something completely different, these 5 issues. I was absolutely surprised that issue number 5 came out before the end of 2021. I thought it was coming out this month. But this is the story of a man whose daughter passed away, but he actually still feels that she is alive because he received a mysterious phone call and it sounded like his daughter. So one of the few things that he knew about his daughter was that she loved puzzles and mazes and stuff like that. So he goes on his own personal quest to actually try and find out, is my daughter in fact alive, or am I just simply losing my mind? What I loved so much about this, outside of the writing, is the artwork, because it looks watercolor. It's so simple yet so complex all at the same time. It's such a unique story. What was kind of funny was, when I was hearing about this book coming out, I was saying to myself, why do I have like Labyrinth vibes? Well, for some strange reason, it felt like something that would have actually done so well in the 1980s. But it's got a lot of heart. It's got stuff in there that makes you think. It's got some very out of the blue moments, which make me just want to read on. And I am hoping, April, that when the trade comes out, you'll get the opportunity to read this, because Andy and I are definitely going to talk about it, and we want you to be a part of this conversation. Jeff Lemire is running on all cylinders right now. I think I said in one of my stat trends and picks that there was a week in December. It wasn't a matter of what was going to be my favorite read of the week. It was which Jeff Lemire book was going to be my top pick of the week, because he's currently writing for Image Comics' Primordial. He's writing this amazing Batman story right now, which is only going to be 3 issues. And he just started writing a 3-issue DC Black Label book on Swamp Thing. And as someone who has never picked up a Swamp Thing comic in my life, I read that book and I loved that first issue. This guy is on fire. I cannot say that better enough. And that's why this book was in my top 3.
I do have it pre-ordered, so I'm excited about that one.
I really thought May's book was a winner. It was just something so fresh and different. And once again, it's the indies. The indies just, not everybody wants to read about superheroes anymore. I mean, that's just the way it is. I still love reading my superhero stories, but I'm constantly looking on these websites to see what's coming out. And are these stories, these indie titles, are they going to be something that I like that's not a superhero story? And I'm just finding so many of them right now.
So it's funny that you were mentioning the 80s, because now those 80s kids that read those things are the adults writing the stories. So for me, it's just that coming full circle thing, just like with the Hades and Persephone stuff. I just think it's really funny to tie it all together.
Well, that's just because of the fact that we 80s kids grew up in the best decades of like ever.
I think, you know, in terms of what you were talking about, Steve, with the indie titles kind of taking segue over the superheroes, I think that says a lot about our society too, because we're not looking for someone to come in and save the day right now. We realize that it's kind of going to be a group effort, but in the other hand, or in another world, another realm of this, I think that we are also gravitating toward these indie titles because they are a lot darker, but they're also very symmetric to the realities that we're living. And I think it's a lot more relatable to people. And so it's not such a challenging read or a read that's lost on deaf ears. You're walking away with something palatable and something that's meaningful, something that you can connect to. And I think that it's, for me, at least personally as a reader, it's been a long time coming that I can actually pick up material that's fictional and say that it's added value to my life, you know, that it's something that I can share with people because of the way it made me feel, the way that it's either brought me out of something or into something or brought me joy, or, you know, even the dark stuff, because I think sometimes dealing with your demons really helps you get through situations and connect to the living again. And for so many of us, we've just kind of been sheltered for the last couple of years, asking those really hard-hitting questions like, who am I? What am I doing? Why am I here? You know, for creators, why am I still creating? Am I having fun with this? And so when you can find something that you get excited about again and that you really want to share with others, that reinvigorates this passion. And that really tells you not only, yeah, I still want to be doing this and I still want to be talking about these things, but now I see what kind of reader I am, and I'm loving that, and I want to share who I am with everyone else because that's my true self, not all this, you know, mainstream stuff. And I think that's pretty cool.
There is another thing that I completely forgot to mention, and I would love to hear someone else jump in on this, but one of the other things that made May's book, among some other indie titles, really stand out for me is the concept of a picture is worth 1,000 words. A lot of these indie titles are visual and they don't need tons of dialogue. Personally, when a couple of weeks ago, I think I even told this, I believe I told this to April, there's a book coming out from Image Comics very soon that is called Step by Bloody Step. It's going to be a 4-issue miniseries. It's a silent issue series. There will be no dialogue. It will all be visual. And I think that that is such a bold thing to experiment with. And that's another thing why I think people like comic books so much, especially right now, because they want to see these artworks tell a story rather than just reading word bubbles. Not saying that that's a bad thing, but the visuals in some of these indie titles have just been beautiful and just captivating.
Yeah, and I know you say, you know, that you're kind of gravitating away from the superhero, but while you're on that, this for me was an honorable mention of 21, but since you're talking about the silent, one of the best stories that came out in this version of Batman stories, which these are 14 different stories, Batman, both illustrated and written by other creators from around the globe. My favorite story in here is predominantly silent. So I just wanted to cue in on that because that really hit home with me, you know, that you can actually tell this remarkable story without saying hardly anything at all. And it's just so impactful.
Yeah, and you're referring to Batman the World, correct?
Yes.
Right. Yeah, that was something that literally came and went. People were talking about it, and then after it came out, nobody said a word about it. So it's good to know that somebody out there did read it and did actually want to actually talk about it.
So first, can you hear me? I switched back to the other mic.
Yes.
Okay. So another thing I wanted to bring up is there's a manga series called Gon, Gon. It's about this little dinosaur. There is zero dialogue in it, and it's been out for years. So I wonder if people who read that are the people inspired to try silent in comics now, because that's been a thing in Japanese comics and manga for a long time, is to let the panel tell your story rather than rely on the words. So often you can find some that you can read really quickly because there's not a lot of words. You're relying on the art to tell the story and your brain is filling it all in. And that is something that manga does really, really well compared to American comics, is relying on the art to tell the story. And so I think it's just slowly infiltrating American comics to kind of help people feel reinvigorated by American comics, because for so long it has been DC, Marvel, these big giant universes that if you read the wrong comic, you're not going to understand what's going on. It's very intimidating.
And there's something to be said about that as well, is because images don't need translated. So it can reach an audience that isn't mono linguistic in a way, because you don't have to sit there and wait for that translation time, which is beautiful in its own right, though there might be some cultural things that get lost a little bit in that imagery. But just to be able to have a whole bunch of people who may not be able to communicate in words together, just seeing that in picture and being able to tell a story that way, and then have people gain something from that, I think is something magical.
Yeah, and it's also like when you're reading a comic book, especially one that's very dialogue heavy with lots of thought bubbles, it takes you away from the drawings, and you're not paying attention on those because you're focused on the story and you're focusing on what's happening. Otherwise, you think you're going to lose it. So especially this year alone, when it came to a lot, particularly in the current X-Men titles, I found myself having to literally pause just so I could look at the art and just see if it's actually good or not, because these books, you know, if you weren't too careful, they were so dialogue heavy, they would put you to sleep if you weren't too careful. But that's another story that everyone and their mother and their cousin twice removed is talking about in the comic book community right now. But Shay, I'd like to hear about your number 2 pick.
Real quick, just last thing about what you just said. So a great example of the art doing the talking for you is Lore Olympus. It's not on my list this year, but Lore Olympus does a fantastic job of letting the art tell the story. She uses bright and vibrant colors to kind of tell who people are in the hierarchy and a little bit about their soul. And it's just really interesting the way she uses that color palette to tell her stories. And it's so fantastic because you can't always trust what you see. And it's chef's kiss, such a good series. If you haven't read Lore Olympus, April and I are hosting our book club. We do retellings. We are doing Lore Olympus as our January pick, so we're very, very excited about it. But anyways, on to my number 2 pick. It was a story that came out of left field for me. It was not something I expected to love as much as I did, and that is Boy Meets Maria. So first off, this story, like, the art is absolutely fantastic. The way that minimalism is used is fantastic. So it ties kind of right into what we were talking about. Let's segue us. Anyways, in Boy Meets Maria, we have this young man here who, when he was little, he wanted to be a superhero. As he gets older and realizes, no, I'm not going to be a superhero, he decides that acting is going to be the way that he, quote unquote, saves the world, by telling stories and helping people feel something good. As he's entering high school, he goes to the theater, group, the theater club, to audition and stuff. And on stage, he sees this person dancing beautifully, and he's immediately smitten with them. He's told this person is named Maria, and he starts to chase Maria, wants to date Maria. But Maria is not Maria. Maria is Arima, a young man. And Arima's dealing with their own sexuality. They don't know how to feel. Their mother wanted a little girl and kind of treated Arima as a little girl when they were growing up, because he is very beautiful. Very, what's the word? My brain doesn't want to come up with
That's a ridiculously good-looking man.
Yeah, they could look like a man or a woman and look amazing. Like, that's essentially what we're getting at.
Androgynous.
There's the word, androgynous. Yes, Arima's very androgynous, and kind of wears their hair in a bob a little bit longer. And so it's the story about their friendship and the journey that they're both going on as they figure out their sexuality. Again, this is a story that came out of left field and I did not expect to love, but it is so entirely powerful that it's something that I feel more people need to read, because it is just done in a way that is beautiful and heartbreaking. There are some triggers in this, so if you are sensitive to certain triggers, make sure you check out trigger warnings before you dive in, because it goes to dark places. We'll just put it that way. But this particular mangaka Peo, they actually have passed away. So we're not going to be getting any more titles. There are a few more that have been written, so hopefully we'll get translations and see them. But this mangaka has passed away, and this is someone that we're not going to see more from, even though they are telling beautiful and powerful stories. And so I really feel like people need to read and understand this human being. I'm like getting emotional. I like I said, this came out of left field and affected me in ways I didn't expect it to. But again, in this one, it's just the imagery and the power that Peo put on page with minimal effort. And just let me see if I can find the particular one I'm thinking of. Like there, you see, that's how he sees Arima for the first time. And it's just minimal dialogue with maximum impact.
That's great.
Oh, it's so good.
That's great. April, how about yourself? What was your number 2?
So this is one we've actually talked about on this channel, and that of course is Dark One by Brandon Sanderson. I had to throw this one in because it is,
of course.
It's Sanderson's comic redemption. It is a story about a young boy who gets pulled into another world, who may or may not be the villain of the story. It plays with the truth of dark and light, what the story really is. And I think it's so much more well done than some of Brandon Sanderson's other projects. And I'm glad to see this in a visual output, because a lot of his stories just lend themselves to being told like this. And the fact that it is confirmed that we will be getting a part 2 of this story, I'm so super excited about, and I can't wait to see where the rest of the story goes, because I need more of this right here. High fantasy, our world crossover kind of nonsense that's just wonderfully done.
I have to be honest, I am shocked that the comic book community did not talk about this book literally at all.
Like Sanderson fans didn't even know that this existed.
I was one of them.
I got to work at the Dragonsteel Minicon, which was Brandon Sanderson's convention where he released Cytonic. He's been posting stuff on his YouTube channel recently about it. But as I was there working for my job, I work as a bookseller at Barnes & Noble, and we had a table because we are Brandon's local store. And the amount of people, like I sold 2 boxes, so at least 40 volumes of Dark One by myself at this convention, because Sanderson fans had no idea that it existed. They kept coming to the table asking for White Sand because they had talked about it in a panel, because it's getting a revamp. It's all going to be consistent art and coming out in an omnibus later this year. But none of them knew about Dark One. So we opened up one of the copies so people could actually flip it open and see the art, and it flew. Like, it sold so much.
I mean, again, if it wasn't for me literally finding out that there was a preview comic on Free Comic Book Day 2020, I would not have even known about this, because for me this year, I'm going to make it my year of Brandon Sanderson, because everything right now that I want to read outside of comic books is Sanderson. I need to read the Reckoners trilogy. I got to read book 2 and 3. I have Cytonic. I got to read that too. The last book of the Wax and Wayne series is coming out at the end of this year. It's a year of Sanderson, everybody. And the day that Dark One number 2 comes out, I will totally be picking it up, because that comic was amazing. Absolutely amazing. And we were fortunate enough to all just know about it, pick it up, and do a review about it here on this channel. And yes, we will do a must-be-read FOMO edition of Volume 2, for sure. For sure. Cammie?
So for me, I know that you told me to kind of keep it in the year of publication, but I didn't completely wholeheartedly dive into this series until 21, and I feel that there was enough continuation in 21 to consider this. So I chose for my second Department of Truth because I dove in head first and did this from start to finish. And this is everything that I am as a reader, as a person. This is conspiracy, this is politics, this is violence, this is horror, this is fantastic. This had me breathless from the cover. I mean, you know, issue 1, this of course is the bind up, but the very first one had JFK, and I am a huge JFK conspiracy theorist. And so to dive into this world, but to realize how much conspiracy, I mean, they touch on everything, flat earth and cryptoids, and you know, I mean, just to get something different from every single issue, it speaks volumes of Tynion. And I know that there's going to be a lot of conversation of James Tynion going forward, but I just feel that his level of genius is not something that my mind was prepared for. He blows me away every single time I open one of his comics, and I've read a lot of Tynion, you know, from Something is Killing the Children to House of Slaughter. So he has captivated me wholeheartedly, but I think this series is so worth it because this really speaks to a multitude of genre seekers. You know, I mentioned a few things that really reeled me in, but it's not so heavy in any one of those areas that you can't find enjoyment, even if you're not into politics per se, or if you're kind of just a lighthearted conspiracy theorist. This is brilliant. The imagery is just gritty and dark, and I'm here for it, and I can't wait to continue on with this series.
It's a great series. I'm reading it too. I have been waiting for the first issue of the 3rd story arc. It's coming out this week, so I'm very excited for it. I actually thought, Cammie, that was going to be your number 1. Just so you know, I had a feeling I was going to see this in your top 3, but I really thought that was going to be your number 1 because I know how much you love that book. It is a great story, and you're absolutely right about James Tynion IV. I mean, he sort of got a little bit of flack this year after he officially concluded his Batman run. A lot of people really didn't like the way that he ended it, but there's a lot of good stuff out there in regards to his indies. You basically mentioned them all. He's got some big plans with Substack coming soon. I don't know when they're coming out, but that's one of the hottest people in comic books right now. And it's also because of the fact that a lot of his work is being picked up by streaming services. They're planning to make a Department of Truth television show. And I would love the fact if they could actually get Gary Oldman to reprise Lee Harvey Oswald and actually play Lee Harvey Oswald on that show. That would be fantastic. But it is a great comic. I'm glad it's on your list, Cammie, because I know a lot of people out there are currently reading it, but more people definitely need to read it. So my number 2, also one that literally took me by surprise, and there were 2 reasons why I wanted to pick it up. Number 1, because it was from one of the best indie comic companies out there right now, and that, of course, is Aftershock Comics. And also because of the fact that it was being written by one of my favorite comic book writers, Ron Mars, who gave me my favorite Green Lantern, Kyle Rayner. He was my Green Lantern in the 90s, and that book is Almost American. This is a really cool story because it's true. This is a story that was written by Ron Mars, but also Jan Newman is the co-creator of this book. He is one of the 2 Russian spies in this story. It is the story of a husband and wife who are Russian spies and defecting to America because they just don't want to do it anymore, and they're being hunted by the KGB. So this is not over yet. We still have 2 more issues, but every single time this new issue comes out, it's my top pick of the week. I am blown away by, again, a lot of detail, but it's mostly visual. There's not as much dialogue, but I just really appreciate the love that these 2 people have for each other. And it's a true story. And because of the fact that it's based on a true story, it feels very real when you're reading it. And I personally will recommend this book to so many people. And I actually had the pleasure to go to my local comic book store and actually meet Ron Mars. I have a second copy of this, and he autographed it for me. I wish I would have brought that out instead of this one, but we talked about it, him and me and some of the other people in the store, and he said it is just so cool to actually say that I am friends with a former Russian spy. And when I gave this my highest praises on our That's Comical Twitter handle, Jan Newman liked it and started to follow us. So I love that. It just shows you that they listen to the fans. They want fans to have great stories, and I just cannot wait for this 5-issue series to officially conclude. I think it's going to be one of the best comic stories to come out in the last 5 years, and I will totally read this book again. It's a great read. Highly recommend it. So let's get into the cream of the crop, everybody. We will start with Shay. Shay, what was your number one pick of 2021?
So anybody who's watched my content recently is not going to be surprised that this was my favorite read of 2021, and that is Sweat and Soap. Sweat and Soap is the healthiest relationship I have ever read in a manga series. We have two people who work at the same company. We have a woman in the accounting department and a man in the product development department. She has always sweat a lot and has a complex about her body odor. And so she works at this company called Lila Drop, which is like a Bath and Body Works style company where they make soaps and body washes and those kinds of products to help you smell good. Anyways, one day she's happily looking at this display of new products, and our guy here walks by and he catches a snip of her and he likes how she smells. So the whole series starts out with him asking her if he can come and smell her every day because it starts to inspire him. Yes, it starts off super weird, but their friendship grows into a romantic relationship, and it is the healthiest relationship I have ever read in a manga series. It's 11 volumes long. Clearly, this is the final volume, and it is truly amazing. These two people are average human beings. There's nothing really weird about them other than he likes how she smells and she has a thing about how she smells. Like, that's the weirdest thing about the whole series, is that. And that really calms down after the first volume. But these two just are moving forward in life. Our guy wants to move at a slightly quicker pace than our female lead, but he's patient with her. He gives her time and space, and they have arguments, they have disagreements, but they are realistic for a couple that's been together for a long time, let alone a couple who's considering getting married. These are things like she's insecure about something and he's like, why aren't you talking to me about this? Like, we need to talk about this. I need to reassure you, but I can't help you if you don't tell me what's wrong. Those kinds of conversations all four of us are married, and I'm sure we've all had these conversations with our partners, because these are realistic, real life conversations where it's like, okay, you're being really quiet. You've been quiet for a week now. Something's going on. You have to tell me what's up. And, you have to talk through those things, but, they have disagreements. You get to know their families, their other coworkers, and it's amazing. It's my favorite manga almost ever. There's only one other that would take the cake, but recently, of the ones that are complete, this is my favorite of all time. And it is so, so good. And that's saying a lot, because there's a 45 volume series out on my shelf that I love just as much. It's just a very different style of a story. But I can't not say that Sweat and Soap isn't a favorite in 2021. I just can't. Even though I technically started reading it in 2020, it finished in 2021. So yes, read it, please. I need more people to read this so I can gush about my children with you, because they are my precious children and I will protect them at all costs.
I love that line so much. I remember when you said that earlier last year, and I just loved that line.
They are my precious children. I love them.
I love that line so much. April, what was your number one of 2021?
So I find it appropriate that earlier you were talking about the labyrinth, because I am one of the biggest Labyrinth fans on the face of the planet. And so my top favorite of this year would have to be Nomen Omen. It's all 3 volumes, not that one. All 3 volumes are out. And it is the story of a girl named Becky who she's colorblind, but the way the story is told, you have pages that are completely in black and white, and then you have pages that are done in rainbow colors, and they're magnificent and beautiful, and it's all part of the storytelling, and there's specific reasons of why that is. So this story is a mixture of Fae lore and Greek and Roman mythology and Shakespeare, and it's so heavy with that labyrinth influence. There are nods to like the dream sequence in here. There are nods to the ending dialogue of the labyrinth. There is a lot of parallels between these storylines that it just stole my heart, and I love it so much. And it's so colorful and not colorful at the same time that my artistic part of me really truly enjoyed this story.
So it's like if a manga and a comic had a baby, it's that story.
Kind of, yeah.
I think there are a lot of those babies being born right now, based on everything that we're learning. That sounds great, though, because I have heard of Nomen Omen, actually. I can't remember where, but I know I had remembered that title very distinctly. Kemi, yourself, your number 1 pick.
So in 2020, I took a dive into an IDW collection, and that was the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle IDW 11 volume collection. And this for me really helped to kind of remember that childhood memory that I was telling you guys about hanging out with my group of friends. It was 4 guys who loved comic books, and we played with Ninja Turtles on the playground at lunch. And it really helped me as an adult, though, understand all the things that I had missed. You know, who really was Shredder? Who was Splinter? Where did they derive from? The history was so rich, and to go back to their countries and to learn about them and to really just get a sense of family and how the turtles derived and all of these things. And so my number 1 pick for 2021 is The Last Ronin. This kind of for me was that availability to understand why I went on that journey in 2020 and had no idea that this was going to kind of begin where that ended for me. And I was pleasantly excited. I was also kind of jarred in a sense because this aged me appropriately. I felt like April was exactly the way that she should have been. I felt like the last turtle standing was exactly the way he should have been. Of course, the pleasant surprise of Casey, and that evolving for me. But this just came to me at such a pivotal moment in my adult life that it helped me to relive my childhood. And I think that's what makes it more magical for me. It is beautifully illustrated. It has all of the right grit, all of the right darkness, but this truly is a gift for that lifelong Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle fan. And the way that it is written is just perfection, you know, just flawed perfection. And I love that. And I'm really, really excited that we are getting volume 5 in February of this year. So let's continue the magic.
Let's hope that it comes out in February of 2022, Cami, because that has been that book's biggest problem. As someone who reads it as well and loves that book to death, it is one of the greatest comic books I've ever read, period. And that says something. But my God, it has taken so long for these 5 volumes to actually hit comic shelves. Like every single time I see it coming out, I'm like, okay, that's great, but is it really coming out at this point in time? So let's hope that the last week of February, The Last Ronin Volume 5 will be out, and we will have all 5 volumes, and we will talk about it. That's for sure. I don't know if we're going to be able to wait until 2024 when the franchise celebrates its 40th anniversary. Yeah, 40th anniversary. So that would
Yikes,
be,
that makes me feel so old.
me too. I don't know if we're going to be able to wait that long, Cammie, but that's a great read. I will definitely agree with you. It is beautiful. It's drawn beautifully, especially when it comes to really getting into the nitty gritty and the dirt and the grime, captured perfectly. And the story is just mind blowing. I cannot wait for issue number 5.
And supposedly they have a pinned date also for issue 6. Supposedly, if 5 goes off without a hitch in February, we should be getting 6 in June. So we'll see.
Oh
Fingers
boy.
crossed.
You see, that's great, but not so great all at the same time, because I just don't want it to wear out its welcome. Because one of the few things that I have been hearing amongst the comic book community is when a new issue comes out, I always hear the same thing. What is this story even about again? Because I completely forgot, because we've been waiting too long. So that's really what it's all about. But that does happen in comic books. That happened in 2021 with the very first What If comic from Marvel, Spider-Man Spider Shadow. That was originally supposed to be 4 issues, but because issue number 1 sold tremendously, they allowed Chip Zdarsky to write a 5th issue. And it was good. I did enjoy that story a great deal. So my number 1 pick sort of got teased a couple of minutes ago. So, April, if you want to, you can add to the discussion. But my number 1 pick of 2021 is Tony Fleecs' Stray Dogs from Image Comics. My hardest decision today was which issue and which cover am I going to show today? Because there's so many of them. I don't have them all in physical format, but I have a lot of NFTs. But anyway,
Aren't there like 100 plus variants at this point?
117 when you take all the variants of the original 5 issues and Stray Dogs, Dog Days, and the trade paperback combined. So I just love the innovation. Tony Fleecs and Trish Forstner. I mean, look, when I saw that this book was coming out in February of 2021, this was a cover buy for me. That is rare for me in regards to comic books. But I was like, this looks like something special. This looked like a Don Bluth animated film. And then I read the little blurb, and it said, Lady and the Tramp meets Silence of the Lambs. And I was like, hell yes. And when I went to my local comic book store and asked my manager, could you put that on my pull list? He goes, absolutely. He said, this is going to be a great book, man. I'm telling you. And it is so fun to actually find someone at your local store that is not reading it. And then it reminded me of Free Comic Book Day when Andy and I were just browsing through all the comic book stores. We were at this one comic book store, and one guy was reading the Stray Dogs blurb, and at the exact same time, we both turned to him and said, are you talking about Stray Dogs? And we just said, yeah, you gotta read it. Don't even ask questions. I love this book so much. Again, this is also a very visual story, but my God, they capture those visuals beautifully with Trish Forstner's art. She does a phenomenal job with this book. And I am so glad that April and Cammie did the Must Be Read FOMO edition episode, because they really gave me a personal new look at this story, because they happen to be animal lovers and pet owners. So this is not just for the average comic book reader. Someone who is a true lover of dogs is going to really look at this story very differently than just some person that wants to read a great comic book. But it has gotten numerous acclaim. So many people who have read it loved it. And from what I am hearing, there's an animated movie in the works. So if that is true, it better not be on streaming. This better be big screen, at least for a limited time, because I would love to see a Stray Dogs film. I'd like to see how they pull it off. I'd like to see who they would even get to be in the cast. But as long as Tony Fleecs and Trish Forstner are going to be helming that film project, I know for a solid fact it is going to be good. This was my best read of 2021.
Yeah, I had this pulled for my honorable mention if nobody else brought it up. I was gonna be like, we need to talk about this one
Yes, we did.
because I don't have a long enough list to talk about everything I want to talk about. So I'm glad that you pulled it up because
You're allowing
it was
honorable
stunningly
mentions because
done.
I have one too.
Feel free. I had no honorable mentions, but if anybody wants to, that is more than welcome. April, please.
Yeah, no, I mean, like you basically covered a lot of what I was feeling about this comic. It speaks to my Disney soul, it speaks to my horror soul, it pulls at all of my heartstrings just because being a
Just
pet
looking at the
parent,
cover, I've never seen something more April in my life, honestly.
right? So yes,
Going
it
into
was
my repertoire.
glorious.
Abby, are you pulling up your variants too?
Well, just the new one, the Stray Dog Days, because this is like everything for me. You know, come on, Creep Show is super cool. It is quintessential classic horror, and you know, you both covered a lot of the points, but I think it really also needs to be stressed that this really is something for the horror fan. It is not so dark that it will give you nightmares and keep you up at night,
No,
but
not at
it
all.
is so psychologically jarring that it will stay in your soul, and you will be like, who the hell allowed these adorable dogs to be drawn with such a dark storyline? Because good Lord, you're a genius. It is beautiful, tragically beautiful, but this is really something for that horror enthusiast. And if the covers, all the variants don't speak volumes to that, shoot, you're not paying attention, because there is literally a horror cover, even for those indie films that you hadn't heard of in years, you know? So yeah, this is one that this one didn't do for me with what I had hoped, only because the stories were just so short. I think what I had thought was going to happen is that we were going to get a much more elongated story of each of the dogs that we had seen in the original, but we just got little pieces. And not to say that that's bad, it's just as a reader I wanted more, and I felt kind of cheated because it didn't give me everything. But as we had all said earlier, sometimes pictures do speak, you know, 1,000 words. And I do feel that even though the stories were short, there was a lot told visually in these that you don't walk away feeling unsatisfied. You just want more, because we're selfish like that. And when we love something, we just want more of it, you know?
Yeah, I think that, and I don't even want to spoil this, so I'm not going to give the total detail because I'm pretty sure April has not read it yet. But I've already read Stray Dogs Dog Days, which is what Cammie was talking about. And the craziest thing is my favorite story in that book does not even involve the dog. It's not the main character. That's what's so crazy about that. That's my tease.
Yeah.
But Cammie, you're absolutely right, and I'm glad, because we got everything from, again, these are artists that do the My Little Pony Friendship is Magic comic book series. That's why I love the fact that they were given this opportunity from Image Comics to make this story. And the best way, I mean, like they were saying, like it's Lady and the Tramp meets Silence of the Lambs. No, I prefer my own tagline. This is Disney gone wrong in all the right ways. That is Stray Dogs for me. And all those variant covers, you're right, Cammie. It's not just the famous slasher films. They take a look at book covers, classic horror comic book covers, even modern comic book covers that are horror-based. There's something that's killing the children variant cover. And they also take a look at Gremlins and Ghostbusters and Goosebumps and all of those great things, and even Japanese horror movies. Just the creativity and the love and dedication to this story. And in the comic book community here on YouTube, this one was on so many top 10 lists. So clearly, these two brilliant creators, they moved mountains this year. And yeah, it's going to be sad when Dog Days 2 comes out at the end of January, because I agree with you, Cammie. I love this story. I don't want it to end. But there's tons of rereadability here. I've already read that story 2 times.
Yeah, me too. And I don't know, who knows what the future holds. Maybe with all its limelight, maybe we will see, you know, kind of a future project that is going to surprise us all. So we'll keep our fingers crossed because we love it so much.
I just hope that Fleeks and Forstner get more projects like this from some of these other indie companies. If they get more from Image, that would be great. But if they're able to do something for any of the other major companies, because I will say this, you will never see a story like this or any of the stories that I mentioned outside of Cami mentioning Injustice. You know, you won't see these kinds of stories from the big two. You won't. It's unfortunate. But that's why I believe that the indie companies are made such a big splash this past year. And I think they're going to make an even bigger splash next year just because of all of the things that happened this past year. All these big writers and artists left the big two to pursue the indie companies because they know that there's more liberty there. And clearly these stories that we talked about define that.
I think that speaks volumes to what Shay had said earlier in terms of redefining the way we read, just kind of us gravitating away from the popular and what everybody's talking about. I really feel that creators, and this comes from the top down, are doing the same thing. They're realizing, I had a passion once, I had a love once. Let me revisit that and let me find out what magic still lies within me. And when you are able to connect with your soul like that and really find and create these projects or read these books or, you know, whatever your passion is, whatever your journey is, it really reflects in the outcome because people really see that true reflection of who you are and what you love. And I think that in a way, it allots for that passion to be reignited in someone who's watching you and enjoying your content because they see, you know what, if that person can do it, given whatever their background, their sex, their age, you know, then I can do it too. And it's okay, you know, because I always say this, I'm a 40-year-old woman who still reads comic books and plays with plastic toys. It's okay for you to do that too, you know? And so as I take this comic book journey, which a lot of people, you know, a normal, regular, random adult off the street might tell me, you know, you're too old to read comic books. I'll be like, phooey on you, because I don't care what you do in your world. I'm perfectly content in my own world now to not have those feelings anymore and not to feel bad about it. I will spend my money the way that I want, and I will love and talk about and boast up and enjoy things with people that also feel the same way. And I think there's a magic to be had with that.
It's not just that, Cami. It's also because of the fact that when someone says to you, you're too old for comics, well, clearly that person has not walked into a comic book store lately, because the only people that I see in my store besides myself buying comics, these people are 30 or older. I see 60 and 70-year-olds picking up new comics right now.
They can afford to. Kids can't afford to pick them up.
But it's also because of the fact that these are characters that have grown with us. Like, we were the ones that were reading all of these characters and all of these stories in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. So we are all grown now, and these writers and these artists who grew up reading these exact same stories are bringing their passion, and they're really trying to connect with not necessarily the younger group. They're trying to connect with the adults in the room right now, because those are the ones that are... A 10-year-old is not reading this book. Plain and simple, a 10-year-old is not reading this book unless their father or mother literally sat them down at age 4 to watch Friday the 13th. So, yeah. Shay, what was your honorable mention, by the way?
I am a cat barista.
Yes!
Because it's just kind of along the lines of what we've been talking about. So the only way you can find this particular cafe with this cat barista, who's this humanoid cat, you know, human sized, working as a barista in this little cafe, is you're so weary and downtrodden that you can't, like, you're so worn out, you're about to like pass out on the street. And then you find this cafe, and this lovely cat serves you whatever you need for the day. So not only is it a foodie manga, it is a cat manga, and it is the best thing. Like, I love it so much. It fed my soul in a way that it's hard to feed my soul in manga, I guess. Because this just is that perfect little, you know, it's got a little bit of color here in the beginning, but again, just very simple. You see the little bits and pieces, you see students, you see office workers, You just see people who are worn out in life coming into this cafe and having this cat take care of them. And it's adorable. There's another one, but it came out in 2022. Well, it came out in 2021, but I didn't read it till 2022. So it might be on next year's list.
Okay. Cammie, do you have any honorable mentions?
Oh, I had already mentioned The World. I think that for me is a huge honorable mention, and I would be hard pressed to not say, come on, Something is Killing the Children was near and dear to my heart all year. I loved all 3 volumes of it.
I was surprised that wasn't on anybody's top 3.
It was so well executed. it was just so well done. I mean, this I could go on and on about this whole series. Maybe I'll do a whole segment just on how much I loved it. And the only reason it didn't make my top 3 this year was because I do feel that any sit down that I had, talking about comics up till now, what have you been reading this month, I did sing its praises. And so I kind of felt like maybe I overdid it in a way. And so I wanted to give some love to some other things that I enjoyed. But this was an offset also to the House of Slaughter too, and this is a brilliant series as well. So like I said, James Tynion, he's right up there for me as a creator, as a illustrator, as a story writer, as someone who kind of just sees the whole picture. I just think there's a level of brilliance to him that the world needed at just this time. And I'm so grateful that I have been able to enjoy so many of his stories. Another one which I'm interested that maybe you might mention as an honorable mention, Steve, that you didn't, was Nice House on the Lake. I really thought that was going to be coming from you.
That's true. I mean, that's also a James Tynion book, but the problem with The Nice House on the Lake is, while it is a very good read, I would say that it was in my top 10. It wasn't in my top 5 because there were some other books that just outshined it. Like, I would highly recommend Echolans by J.H. Williams from Image Comics, not just because of the story itself. I mean, it's a very simple story about a heist and trying to escape the baddies, but it's literally like if 50 comic book artists actually drew one book, but it's all being drawn by one person, and it's just gorgeous to look at. And also because it's written on the horizontal, not the vertical, which is what makes it even more interesting. And I watched this channel called Comics Elite, which is a group of comic book store owners, and I love watching them every Wednesday because they do their Skippets and Nez for the week, and then they do their top 10s. One of the guys, Drew, said in issue number 4, he says this guy draws the Kirby crackle. Now, if you don't know what that means, if you've seen it, you know it. It's a classic drawing style from Jack Kirby. It's like that big cloud of light, and you see these dark black spots scattered throughout. The fact that this person was even able to reinterpret the Kirby crackle, but include different art styles around the Kirby crackle is just such an interesting thing. Like, I literally just read this book, and I literally sometimes will take like massive pause and just flip to the pages because I just want to see what this looks like today. Like, this just looks amazing. And another story that I would have to give its high praises for is a book that very few people talked about, and it's from the company AWA Upshot. Frank Cho's book, it was 5 issues, Fight Girls. If that was what the Hunger Games was, we'd be in a whole different world right now for the better, because that book was so damn cool. It was a reality show. It was about women fighting to become the next queen of the universe, and just seeing what they went through and all these different terrains and how some of them didn't even make it. Like, this was the Hunger Games on crack, and I loved every minute of that story. And then the twist at the end of book number 5, I will officially say chef's kiss. That was fantastic. I would highly recommend Fight Girls. It's just fun. That's what it was. And that's when it comes to me in my reading, that's all that I want. I just want a fun time to read these comic books and mangas at some point in time. But I think that 2022, I see Shay, I see you waving. I see you waving that finger at me. I am excited for 2022, especially this month, because the big news is the fact that Brian K. Vaughan and Fiona Staples are bringing back Saga with issue number 55. I know that people are so excited. And now that I'm officially caught up, I am just excited to talk about this book. And I'm also very excited to see what the channel holds, because we're going to be going down so many different avenues. And one of the few things that I particularly want to say today that I think is going to excite everyone is I am officially opening the doors. Every single one of you, we all have the keys to the kingdom. I'd like everybody to start inviting others in. I want to have people invite some of their fellow content creators to talk about some of the things that they love in the world of comics and manga. It's time to bring some guests. I've already got 3 guests lined up for some future recordings, and I am very excited about that. And I am just excited to continue this journey with you guys. And just in case you all out there did not see my other channel, I am hoping that I am going to be able to do the very best that I can, especially after the midpoint of this year, because I will be officially welcoming a new baby into this world, and my wife and I are very excited. I officially found out that as of now, the due date is New Comic Book Day. That would actually be written in the stars, fantastic for me. But I have a feeling that we're going to be okay. But the most important thing is, I am just happy to say that I have a team that is strong-willed, one that is willing to take the reins if, God forbid, I cannot steer the ship for just a little while. But thank you very much for watching, everybody. This was great. I enjoyed this show. I enjoyed talking to all of you, and I am looking forward to seeing you all out there in the next one.